Hi, everybody. I hope you guys can hear me, although it looks like I'm the only one with the camera on, so I can't even have you wave if you can hear me. So I'm just going to go like this. All right, thanks for joining me this week. We're going to be doing our monthly webinar. So this month's webinar is on digestive disorders. So it's a huge topic, right? There's not like some of the past ones I've done where we focused on a single thing like heart disease or diabetes. Digestive disorders covers everything from GERD to acid reflux to SIBO and Crohn's disease. So I'm going to do this a little different, where we're just going to mainly, we're going to be talking about some symptoms and some diseases, but we're going to focus more on just how to create a healthy bioterrain of the gut system. All right. So here we go. All right. So if anybody who doesn't know who Hippocrates is, he's the father of modern medicine, and he's what every medical doctor has to say. The Hippocratic Oath is based on Hippocrates. And he's famously quoted as saying that all disease begins in the gut. And the reason why we say all disease begins in the gut is because your gut is basically the barrier between the outside world and the inside world, right? If you think about it, your gut's just basically a tube, right? So it's part of the external environment, not the internal. And the way things get in is they go through the gut. And then when we look at immune function, a huge chunk of the immune function is in the gut, right? It's called the GALT, which stands for gut-associated lymphoid tissue. And now I'm posting another video later on this week about lymphatics and what lymph tissue does. But it's basically a highway system for immune system and also detoxification, things like that. But the lymphoid tissue in the intestines is extremely important for immune function. Okay, then other things that the intestines are also going to be responsible for are things like making serotonin. Now, serotonin is the feel-good hormone. Most people think serotonin is mainly made in the brain, and it is made in the brain, but it's also made in the intestines, which is why we can get some intestinal problems when we have serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are an antidepressant drug. So if you want to increase, or if you're being depressed and you want to increase your mood, you could start with the gut. Right. Now the gut also has its own nervous system, which is unique to the intestines or the gut system itself, called the enteric nervous system. So we can function without the functioning of the rest of the nervous system, unlike the rest of the body. So when we look at gut and what can go wrong with it, we boil it down to four basic things, right? You have microbial imbalance, and that's going to be called dysbiosis, which consists of things like bacteria, parasites, and whatnot, and invaders. We have food intolerances, okay? We have inadequate digestive processes, like lack of stomach acids, or diabetes could fall into that category as well. And then we have inflammation. And how are we going to take care of this? Well, we're going to look at called the 5R protocol, okay? And that's, we're going to remove the offender, okay? We're going to replace it. We're going to re-inoculate it. We're going to repair the gut, and then we're going to rebalance any nutritional deficiencies that we have, okay? All right, so when we talk about the gut, it starts at the mouth, and it goes all the way down to the anus, right? So in each part is integral, and each part can have a dysfunction to it, right? So we're going to try and break it down by section. All right? We're going to start in the mouth, then work through the esophagus, and then the stomach, and then the intestines, and then we'll talk a little bit about liver, gallbladder function, and pancreas and whatnot. So functions of your GI tract, or your gut. Right. We have digestion, of course. It's also endocrine. We talked about serotonin and the gall. You have expulsion, right? Waste products. It's protection as well. Part of the main jobs of the hydrochloric acid is not digestion, but is to kill foreign invaders, like the parasites and bacteria that's on the food that we ingest. We have motility, okay, to make sure that the food bolus gets through the body. We have absorption of nutrients, secretion, and storage. Okay, the ideal digestive system eliminates toxins as well, right? Things like cholesterol and bacteria. We have also red blood cells that have been expunged, go through the feces as well. Okay, so we talked about the GI having its own nerve system. Blood flow is through something called the splanchnic beds. Okay, and it goes out through portal veins directly into the liver, which is why the liver is an integral part in digestion. Yeah. So this is a breakdown of what we're going to be talking about and how your digestion goes. Right, so it starts in the mouth, and you get mechanical digestion through grinding of the teeth of the foodstuffs. Okay, and you have saliva, which begins the process of breaking down food through something called salivary amylase. So usually, for the most part, it breaks down carbohydrates. Okay, it also acts to protect against bacteria, and it lubricates for easy swallowing and motility of the food bolus. Okay, the salivary glands are the parotid glands, sublingual and submandibular. So as we swallow, right, food goes down through the esophagus and enters the stomach, and we can have some problems there between the esophagus and the stomach. There's a sphincter there that can become dysfunctional, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. Okay, and then the stomach, we're going to produce hydrochloric acid, beginning the digestive process, and also try and kill any invaders. Then we get to the small intestine, and there we're going to add the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. After the small intestine goes to the large intestine, where foods have generally been digested by this time, and the large intestine is going to help absorb with B12 and vitamin K, and then it's going to be pushed out through the rectum. Okay, so we talk about the salivary glands. They are again responsible for the beginning of digestion, and they're under two cranial nerves, cranial nerve 7 and cranial nerve 9. So if we're having problems with salivary production, it's possible that we could have some cranial faults. So you have bones in your head, and they move with respiration. And if some of the cranial nerves can get hindered because of that cranial respiration, so that can be a problem, which it can also cause lack of proper digestion due to not enough saliva. Okay, when we sleep, our saliva production goes down, which is why in the morning we get bad breath, right? Because saliva helps get rid of some of that bacteria that we talked about. And when we sleep, we don't have the saliva, so we wake up, overgrowth of bacteria in the mouth. So if we want to kind of combat that, it's called halitosis. But if we want to combat that, an easy fix would be just to do a oil pulling. So what you do is you get some coconut oil, and you put it in your mouth, about a tablespoon of coconut oil, put it in your mouth, and swish it around for 20 minutes each morning. You do that for about 3 weeks, and kill all the bacteria in your mouth and take care of that nasty bad breath in the morning. So here is our stomach, where our journey continues, right? So the stomach has a special architecture where it has these little bumps on it to help digest food. So the food will run over through those little bumps and help break it down. All right. And the cells of the stomach, so this can just get a little boring, but there's a reason why I put it in there. Okay, we have epithelial cells or mucus cells, and the mucus is there for a reason. It's there because we want to make sure that the stomach acid doesn't eat away at the stomach lining. And I put it in there on purpose because what happens is when we start to take things like antacids and whatnot, it can circumvent that, and we lose that mucus secretion, and we can start to get ulcers. Okay. We have also parietal cells, which secrete the hydrochloric acid, and most importantly, something called intrinsic factor. So if we're, again, taking some kind of antacid because we have GERD or acid reflux or something, heartburn, things like that, we're going to start losing our intrinsic factor. So why is that important? Well, intrinsic factor is needed for the absorption of vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is needed for the nervous system, which is the master control system of the body. So all of a sudden now we don't have enough B12 in the body because we're taking some antacids for our heartburn, and now we start to get neurological problems. So there's a much better way to do things, and we're going to get on that in a minute. All right. The other thing that's also a problem when we start to take an antacid is calcium needs an acidic environment to be absorbed. So we're taking antacids, you're not going to absorb any calcium. All right. And with calcium goes magnesium, and we start to get other problems because without magnesium, we start to get increased things like H. pylori, which causes ulcers, and we start to get a concomitants of problems that just seem to never end. Okay. So our chief cells they secrete pepsinogen and gastric lipase, and we have endocrine cells that secrete somatostatin, and mast cells which secrete histamine. So why is the last one was put there? Because if we take an antihistamine, right, histamine is needed again to stimulate hydrochloric acid production. So if we're taking some kind of antihistamine because we have hay fever or something like that, we can inadvertently interfere with the production of a hydrochloric acid and start to create problems where they seem like they're not related, because it's hard to put two and two together. But we're creating a problem that wasn't there in the beginning. Okay. So our gastric secretions, there's HCl, hydrochloric acid, which digests food. And we mentioned earlier, it kills bacteria and can convert pepsinogen to pepsin, which digests proteins. Okay, the intrinsic factor, again, we mentioned that a little earlier, which is required for B12 absorption in the large intestine. Pepsinogen, agent protein digestion. Gastrin, which stimulates the hydrochloric acid secretion, and also gastric motility. When we have low gastric motility, right, we get constipation, and we get something called leaky gut, which we're going to explain in a little bit. Then we have lipase, which digests fats, and then that mucus, which we talked about earlier, for the lining of the stomach. And other factors like somatostatin inhibitors, it inhibits HCl secretion, right, which we just mentioned, which is histamine stimulating HCl secretions. So there's a quick little side note. If anybody's got diabetes, metformin, which is used to treat diabetes, can also cause a loss of intrinsic factor. So anybody who's taking that drug should definitely be on some kind of B12 supplement. Okay. So our key aspects of acid production and secretion include, okay, so this is just dry. So the reason why I put this on there is because I wanted you to see that last one, that protein pump. Okay, so that protein pump is what's responsible for pumping the hydrogen in to make the hydrochloric acid. And what's one of the things that medication called a protein pump inhibitor, okay, which targets the reduction of acids, okay, for things like GERD and esophageal reflux, okay. But we're going to see how this protein pump it's probably not the best way to do things, because now you get hydrogens backed up and you change the pH in your system. So to secrete the acids, right, there's something called a vagus nerve. Okay, the vagus nerve acts directly and indirectly through stimulation of gastrin and histamine release, and inhibits local somatostatin release. You have insulin, which carries through the blood and promotes hydrochloric acid secretion, and caffeine actually can increase that protein pump activation. So NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, which include things like aspirin, ibuprofen, and similar drugs, can cause gastric ulcers, because what happens is they circumvent that mucus protection of the lining. Right, so people who take that, one aspirin a day to lower your blood pressure are going to wind up hurting their intestinal system and start creating ulcers. So we're going to start with gastritis, heartburn, acid reflux, pretty much the same thing, right? It's a phenomenon of digestive juices, mainly hydrochloric acid, but we'll also see that there's some other things as well, which start to back up into the esophagus and cause a burning sensation. So, the medical model of that is saying, oh, well, you're producing too much hydrochloric acid, so we give you either, like I said, protein pump inhibitor or histamine to stop that production of hydrochloric acid. But now you're opening yourself up to, number one, increase of things like bacteria, parasites, because you don't have enough hydrochloric acid to kill that stuff. You also don't have enough hydrochloric acid for digestion. The problem with GERD and things of that nature is not so much that you have too much stomach acid, because the body rarely, unless you have some kind of a tumor or something like that, the body's not going to produce excess of stomach acid. It's too costly. Usually what happens is, especially as we age, we don't produce enough stomach acid. And now the food sits in your stomach and it's not being digested because we don't have enough stomach acids in there. So it starts to either ferment or starts to get rancid and starts to produce a gas, and it starts to weaken a sphincter, which we're going to show you in a few slides. And either the sphincter weakens and that gas gets escaped up into the esophagus, and that's what's causing the irritation. So instead of just saying, well, let's cut out the acid production, we're going to do the reverse. And we're actually going to see if we can, number one, determine if there's enough stomach acid, and if there's not, help the body produce more stomach acid. All right. Sorry about that. So one thing is acid-reducing medications like H2 antagonists or the protein pump inhibitors work by blocking natural stomach acid production. Okay, and we mentioned why that's not exactly the best route to do. Okay. So what happens is heartburn is a result of excess gastric pressure in the stomach, which can be from a number of different reasons. It can be caused by bacteria, either producing gases in the colon or in the small intestine, which is something called SIBO, which stands for small intestine bacterial overgrowth, which produces most likely methane, but could be some other gases as well. And that's going to create pressure in the stomach, and it's going to allow for leakage up into the esophagus and cause that burning. Also, you can have H. pylori, which is a bacteria that produces ulcers, which can also produce a gas, creating pressure, and again, causing that reflux. We can get ingestion of gas-producing foods and drinks, right, like beans or carbonated water, fermented vegetables, will cause internal pressure. GMOs, which stands for genetically modified organisms, can also cause this. And then tight-fitting clothing, right, like a belt that's restricting or something like that, can all cause reverse that pressure to build up and back up into the esophagus. Okay. Other things that can lead to it would be things like incorrect posture. Now, if just for an example, if you don't believe me, all you have to do is just kind of bend over forward and try and take a deep breath in, and you'll see that it's kind of laborious, kind of hard to breathe in, versus sitting up straight, keeping your chest out and spine straight and breathe in. You'll see it's a lot easier to breathe in because there's less pressure there. So that same pressure acts on the diaphragm, which is going to push up on the contents. Not push up on the contents. I'm sorry. It's going to create stress on where the esophagus goes into the stomach and cause problems there. So we have a weak what's called lower esophageal sphincter, which is due to increased pressure caused by more stomach contents. We have a lack of digestive enzymes. Okay, hydrochloric acid being the main one, which can lead to the gas buildup. You can get candida overgrowth or fermentation of gases. Constipation can also lead to increase in toxins and gases and excessive bacteria in the colon. Then lack of chloride in the diet, that can lead to a decrease in stomach acids, right? You need hydrochloric acid, HCl. So if you don't have the Cl, right, then you're going to have a problem. Then you can have poorly functioning gallbladder, and we're going to talk about that later on in the lecture. Liver and pancreas can all cause a problem with GERD. And then three other things, I'm sorry, is a hiatal hernia, and then improper defecating posture, not sitting properly when you're going to the bathroom, and then parasites. Okay. So we mentioned for the medical model that the two ways that they do things are the protein pump inhibitor and what's called the H2 antagonist. Okay, you probably recognize some of those brand names of drugs, which I'm not going to say out loud. But if you take a protein pump inhibitor for longer than a month, then you get some extra issues that might develop from lack of stomach acids, right? Like we talked about, it's possible that you can get increase in bacteria, parasites, fungus, things like that, because stomach acid is not killing that. You're also going to circumvent your intrinsic factors, so your B12 is not going to be absorbed, which is going to lead to other problems, right? Bone fractures because calcium is not being absorbed because you have low acid in a high acidic environment to absorb calcium, which is why it's funny to me that some of these antacids on the market, they add calcium in it, which it makes no sense, right? You're taking something that lowers your stomach acid, but calcium needs a high acidic environment to be absorbed. So it's just a marketing ploy. And then you have increased risk of infection, magnesium deficiency also, which we mentioned, food allergies, and SIBO. Okay. And then on the other side of the coin, the H2 antagonist is worked by lowering that histamine level, as we mentioned earlier, and which lowers stomach acid production. Okay. But I love this slide, so I put it in here. This is kind of what you're doing when you're taking a medication. It's if you ever had a car that had a check engine light and you knew something was wrong with the car. Same thing with your body, right? Symptom is that check engine light telling you something wrong with your body. Now, you would never just put a piece of tape over it and just blacken it out with a pen. Say, oh, look, I just fixed my car, right? But that's exactly what we're doing when we are not paying attention to our body and we're just taking some kind of a pill to help ease our symptom. Now, I'm not saying you should never take a pill, because if you have a splitting headache, right, nobody wants to suffer. But it's the chronic consumption of these drugs that we get into a problem. Okay, so if you have to, if your doctor recommends you taking a pill, that's fine. But always search for the cause of the problem, because I guarantee you there is a cause. Right, your body is designed to be perfect. It's designed to work perfectly. Right, it's just a law of nature. So take the pill, but start to investigate why you're having the dysfunction. All right, let's move on. So we're going to go on to H. pylori, which is the number one reason why people get ulcers. So usually it's diagnosed through a stool sample or a lactulose absorption breath test, because it'll produce a gas. All right. Bacteria, H. pylori is a bacteria which increase ulcers and can proliferate when powerful hydrochloric acid is not present to maintain the harmony of the gut. Okay, so whether you're suffering from an ulcer or just you want to avoid developing one, you want to build that hydrochloric acid in your system. It's critical. Right? Where low hydrochloric acid can be problematic. So something as simple as your thyroid can be a problem why you're not producing enough hydrochloric acid. It's actually a very common sign of a low thyroid function is gastric problems, because you have no hydrochloric acid. By the way, if anybody's interested in thyroid issue, I think that's going to be next month's lecture. We're going to be doing thyroid, so just let me know and I'll sign you up for that. Okay, so when you build up your hydrochloric acid, you're going to not only kill off the bacteria in your stomach, but you're also killing off any bacteria that might be trying to get into your stomach. Right? Acid naturally found in fruits actually dissolve bacteria, so some fruits can be beneficial to getting rid of the H. pylori, as well as SIBO, as we'll see in a bit. Okay. Other things that you can do to help kill the H. pylori is mastic gum, which is in studies. to eliminate H. pylori. Okay, cranberry juice also inhibits it. Zinc. Now, zinc is very good for repairing the gut. So anybody who's got any kind of gut problems in general, you want to add zinc to your diet. All right. And then betaine hydrochloric acid is a supplement that you would take while you're trying to get your body to produce its own stomach acid, right? You don't want to rely on, even a nutraceutical, because then you're doing the same thing that you would be doing with, with a pharmaceutical drug. I mean, granted, it's going to be a little bit healthier, but you're doing the same thing. You're not allowing the body to do what it needs to do. And lastly, kefir, which is a probiotic. And not just kefir, any probiotic will do it, whether it's sauerkraut or something like that, is going to give a supply of good bacteria, what called probiotics, which will then compete with the antibiotic, or with the bacteria, and help kill the bacteria. So other things that can relieve stomach acids, stomach ulcers, are ginger. Okay, ginger is very effective at helping kill off H. pylori. Okay, fruits, as we mentioned earlier. Unripened plantains. So plantains, it's like in a banana family. It's popular in South America. It's going to help with that stomach, the mucus lining. That's going to prevent the hydrochloric acid. The H. pylori from taking hold. So they're very useful. Okay, Manuka honey has an antimicrobial effect. Okay, garlic also is very effective, and aloe vera is probably one of my favorite things for healing the gut. So about an inch of fresh raw aloe vera a day. Then licorice supplement, right? Not just the licorice you find in a candy store, right? But actually, you have to supplement with licorice will help fight the infection. And lastly, cayenne pepper. It's a natural pain reliever, and it's helpful for killing the bacterium as well. All right. And other couple of things that I made as a side note that I should mention are things like chamomile tea will help with intestinal spasm and inflammation, and help relieve some of the symptoms of ulcers. And cabbage can be very helpful in warding off ulcers and acid attacks as well. All right. So how do you tell if you have H. pylori or an ulcer if you don't have access to some of those tests that we mentioned earlier? So one of the easiest ways you can do, now it's not 100%, but it's a good little screen, is on an empty stomach. You're going to get 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar and mix it with 2 tablespoons of water and just drink it. Okay. And then just note the time that you take. Now, if pain occurs within the first 5 or 10 minutes, okay, indicates possibly that you have some kind of problem with an ulcer in the stomach lining, right? Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to create an acidic environment in the stomach. And if you have an ulcer or an open bare spot on your stomach, it'll irritate that. Now, if that pain occurs after about 30 minutes, okay, that tincture that you just made has already moved past the stomach and into small intestine. All right. And then if there's no pain, it's probably safe to say that you don't have an ulcer. Now, one thing to note is if you're going to try this, have some kind of an alkaline solution with you, like a half teaspoon of baking soda, because you want the burnings to stop, right? You don't want to suffer. So the baking soda solution, drink that if you're starting to get, a burning sensation, and that should clear it right up. And then to fix it, right, we already went over it, all the stuff we mentioned earlier. Okay, so on the other side of the coin would be another possible reason why you could have acid reflux or whatnot is because, again, we mentioned not producing enough stomach acid. So how do you know if you're not producing enough stomach acid? You can do a baking soda test, right? You get some sodium bicarbonate, and what you're going to do is in the morning, right before you eat, you're going to mix about a 1/4 teaspoon with about 4 ounces of cold water, and you're going to drink the solution, and you're going to see how long it takes you to burp. All right. So if you're burping in under 3 minutes, usually means that you have a decent amount of stomach acid in you, because the sodium bicarbonate is going to react with the stomach acid and produce a little bit of gas and get you to burp. Now, if it takes more than 5 minutes to burp, it means that you probably don't have enough stomach acid, and you want to try and help improve your stomach acid's production, right? Which is, which is going to be, we call it hypochlorhydria, right? Hypo, not enough, chlorhydria, HCl. So one powerful way to build up your hydrochloric acid in your body is to drink about 16 ounces of straight celery juice on an empty stomach first thing in the morning for about 3 to 4 weeks. So celery juice has a lot of mineral salts that are going to help restore your body's ability to make stomach acids. Okay, the mineral salts are actually also poisonous to the bacteria, and they'll help kill off any kind of bacteria that's in there as well. Right? And it's very effective also for things like SIBO. Okay, so another reason why you could have GERD or acid reflux is something called a hiatal hernia. So symptoms of hiatal hernia are dull pain in the chest, right? Acid reflux, shortness of breath, heart palpitations could be another reason, and then pain in the esophagus after swallowing. But a lot of hiatal hernias go unchecked because they're not symptomatic. So when we talk about hiatal hernia, right, we have the esophagus, which is this right here. Okay, so as we swallow food, it comes down the esophagus. Now it has to cross here, which is your diaphragm. Okay? So it crosses through the diaphragm, through these little superior or left and right crura, which kind of surround the esophagus and kind of hold it in place, and it goes into the stomach. Now, if you have a problem with the diaphragm's not working properly, right, these crura can malfunction, and we can get part of the stomach to slip up into the diaphragm, right? So the diaphragm will move, right? As we inspire or take a deep breath in, the diaphragm comes down, and then as we exhale or expire, the diaphragm goes up, right? So it moves up and down with our breath, right? So now, next slide. If we have this, here's a diaphragm right here, right? Here's the stomach contents and esophagus. So we'll see that this sphincter right here, lower esophageal sphincter, if that's not working properly because either the crura are not doing their job, or the diaphragm's not doing its job, or whatever the case may be, part of the stomach contents slip up, and you can see how we can get gases slipping up there. We can get hydrochloric gases slipping up there and cause our GERD. Okay, there's two types of hiatal hernia, right? There's an esophageal and a stomach, which is right here. So either way, we're going to treat them the same. And right, so reasons why we can have that, again, tight clothing can put pressure on the stomach or the lower esophageal sphincter, which can aggravate it. Okay, so poor posture is another reason, and you would see like a chiropractor like me to get that realigned. Excessive curvature in the spine can increase pressure on that stomach and that lower esophageal sphincter. And the sphincter can become weak over time because of things like irritation, because of foods that we eat or something like that. Key foods being peppermint, chocolate, tomatoes, and citrus juices. Okay, use anything that contains nicotine. Nicotine and caffeine will also weaken that sphincter. Medications like SSRI, which is antidepressant, right? Other medications and sedatives, and estrogen replacements. Okay, so if you have nerve damage is done to the vagus nerve, which we mentioned earlier, that can also have an effect. H. pylori can also cause a weakening of that sphincter. SIBO, because it's going to increase methane gas, which is going to increase pressure and weaken that sphincter. And we talk about the hiatal hernia, and all of that's pretty much it. Okay, so. So here's how we fix it. Right? What happens is, remember, as we take a breath in, the diaphragm's right here, it comes down. As we breathe out, the diaphragm goes out. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to go back a few slides. Yeah. So as we breathe in, right, this comes down. As we breathe out, this goes up. So as this is coming down, right, the diaphragm right here, as this is coming down, you're going to take your fingers and try and put it up as high as possible. As you exhale, this will start going up. Now what we want to try and do is we want to try and hold this part down or pull it down, right? So inhale, dig your hands up, up, up as high as you can and hold this in place. Exhale, this will start going up and we want to try and pull, pull this part down. All right, hopefully that is kind of clear. So inhale, reach in and up, and exhale, and you're going to pull down. Right? You're going to do that 4 or 5 times, and hopefully that'll help pull that esophageal sphincter, the stomach part below that that sphincter. And then after you do that, what you can do is you're going to rub this reflex. Now this is an applied kinesiology reflex that was discovered by George Goodhart a long time ago for the diaphragm. And it's on the sternum and down on the angles of the ribs, right? And just rub those for about 30 seconds. Now, if you notice that there's any place on those reflexes that are a little sore, you spend a little bit of extra time on that part. Just rub in circles, right? And as we rub that, it's going to stimulate the diaphragm. Okay. Now, sometimes that one is all that's needed, but other times you're going to need to see a chiropractor because there is a place in the back of the spine, right between the thoracic vertebrae and the first lumbar vertebrae, that gets stuck, which is going to cause a problem because you're going to create pressure in your back because you're going to have what's called subluxation, and it's not going to allow that to heal 100%. Okay. Also, what you want to try is you want to try and exercise that diaphragm to see if we can get a little bit more tone in it, right? And you're going to do that by, you can either sing songs, you can do some deep breathing, right? You can do some exhaling with force, like blowing up balloons, and then things like that. That'll all help increase the tone of your diaphragm. And then lastly, to help tonify that sphincter, you're going to see if you can take some calcium citrate. Right, in theory, it should strengthen the lower esophageal sphincter, okay, when it comes in contact with it when you drink the mixture. Just mix it with water and in a powder form, right? You can't take a pill because it won't come in contact with it. Right. And digestive enzymes will help break down your food in the stomach and help reduce the gas or pressure and help give that lower esophageal sphincter time to heal. L-glutamine and grass-fed whey help rebuild the integrity of your gastrointestinal system. So, right, we're going to talk about L-glutamine when we talk about things like leaky gut and stuff like that. It's also going to be key to helping repair that gut. Okay, and then melatonin and 5-HTP have been also shown to increase lower esophageal sphincter. Okay, Swedish bitters is a mixture of herbs that can help stimulate digestion and help maintain proper gallbladder function and gastric emptying. So moving on to the small intestine. All right, so the small intestine is where the bolus of food is going to leave the stomach. When it leaves the stomach, it's going to be acidic and it's going to go into the small intestine. Now, if the food hasn't been digested properly at this point, it can get spit back to the stomach for further digestion and processing. But for the most part, it goes into the small intestine. Now, when it's acidic, it's going to signal the pancreas to release its digestive enzymes, mainly protease, amylase, and lipase. Those are for digesting fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Right? Now, if the food is not acidic enough, it won't stimulate that pancreatic enzymes, and digestion will be circumvented at this point. All right, so it's another reason why we want to avoid taking antacids or things of that nature, or cutting out the hydrochloric acid that we have. So the biggest problem that we have in the small intestine is bacterial overgrowth, right? Known as SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. Symptoms would include indigestion, gas, bad smelling feces, abdominal pains, constipation or diarrhea, food allergies. Sometimes you get a low-grade fever, and there's a correlation between rosacea, which is a reddening of the skin, and SIBO. So SIBO is almost always caused by irritable bowel syndrome, right? It gives the bacteria an opportunistic infection to take hold. The problem with SIBO is that it's kind of hard to get at that bacteria because it's kind of deep in the small intestine. So most antibiotics kind of don't really hit it very well. Okay, the bacteria also decreases fat absorption, creating oily stools. So that might be something else you notice, that if your stool is very oily, it's possible you have some SIBO, or if you're noticing you're very bloated, right? Because SIBO produces a gas. And deficiencies in vitamins, specifically vitamin A and vitamin D, right? In previous lectures, we talked about how that's needed for proper immune function. Okay. And the intestinal lining further degrades, and eventually you can't digest larger food particles. And then you start to get more irritable bowel syndrome, like Crohn's and colitis and things like that. So it's often will cause food allergies, sensitivities, things like gluten, fructose, and lactose. And SIBO gets intestinal permeability, which is going to break down what's called gap junctions in the intestine and allow things like undigested foodstuffs and other bacteria to get into the bloodstream and create opportunistic infection. So how do you diagnose SIBO? Well, the gold standard is by doing a SIBO breath test, right? They're gonna collect your breath at various times and check it for methane. The name of the test, there's two tests that are pretty much the gold standard. One is called lactulose 3-hour. There's a 10 tube sample test. And then there's a little bit of a newer test. It's a 3-gas test called a Trio Smart. And either one of those will work. Okay, these particular tests allow for a better methane and hydrogen sulfide diagnosis, which is what's needed for SIBO. Glucose is the other SIBO breath test option, right? But you don't want to do that because it's not exactly specific for the lower parts of the infection. Okay, so lactulose is available for fermentation in the entire length of the small intestine, as well as the large intestine, which could be missed if you do the glucose test. Okay, glucose, in contrast, tends to be absorbed only within the first 3 feet of the small intestine, which means that's not available for fermentation in the middle and the lower intestine. All right. So the treatment options, right? We already mentioned antibiotics. Now, the antibiotic that's used for SIBO is called rifaximin. And as far as antibacterials goes, or antibiotics go, it's a little safer than some of the other ones. A lot of antibiotics will cause ruptures of tendons. Okay, but I didn't see anything in the research that happens with rifaximin. So that would be one option to go. There's also something called an elemental diet. So an elemental diet is a liquid formula that replaces food for a length of time, right? The idea is it's for like 2 to 3 weeks, but the liquid nutrients absorbed at the top of the small intestine. So you're trying to starve off or kill the bacteria. And it shows about an 85% success rate. But it doesn't taste very well, and 2 to 3 weeks of just liquid diet can be a little bit difficult. And then the third option is with a holistic option using herbs, right? Like grapeseed extract, oregano oil, garlic, berberine, golden seal, Oregon grape, olive leaf extract, and something called Pau Darko. Which is a collection of herbs. Yeah. So there's some other herbs that are noteworthy with dealing with SIBO: thyme, sage, oregano, parsley. We already mentioned olive leaf, and cilantro. And that Pau Darko tincture is a collection of herbs, I believe. And then we have some teas. Right? Elderberry seems to be one of the better ones. It's a very powerful antibacterial and antiviral as well. Okay. Then we mentioned earlier in the lecture about zinc being very reparative and restorative for the GI tract, and then B12 as well. And then you want to make sure that we're avoiding chocolate, because that's just going to feed the SIBO. And the other thing to mention is we can get a magnesium deficiency which can cause neurological problems when we get SIBO. So we want to supplement with the magnesium to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, so if you do have SIBO, right, something that you want to adopt is a FODMAP diet. So FODMAP stands for fermentable oligo, and monosaccharides and polys. Okay, basically what happens is you're feeding the bacteria, right? So I'm going to give you some examples, but there's a big list of foods to eat, foods to avoid on a FODMAP diet, so that you're not feeding the bacteria, right? The idea is to try and starve them out. And when we're on a FODMAP diet, we're going to notice a big change in that gas and bloating. So here's the example of some FODMAPs, which include fructose, lactose, fructans, lactans, polyols, fruits, okay, sweeteners, dairy products, vegetables, legumes, wheats, and other grains, and some beverages, right? That all will ferment in the intestine and start to feed that bacteria, right? If you just do a Google search, because it takes some little playing with it to find a diet that's suitable for you. So as we move on to the large intestine, as we mentioned earlier, the large intestine has a few jobs. Number one, is for excretion, right, of any kind of invaders of bacteria that's been already killed, things like that, of red blood cells that have been died off. Also, it's going to reabsorb water, and it's responsible for vitamin K and vitamin B12, and thiamine, riboflavin, and biotin. Okay, so all right. So what can happen if we're getting irritation in this area, right? Which can cause things called leaky gut, right? So what happens is you have these normal tight junctions of the cells in the intestines, and they prevent all these pathogens like bacteria and whatnot from getting into the bloodstream. But when we have eating either foods that we're allergic to, or that are irritating the gut, or we're having not as much motility because we don't have enough fiber in the diet, or we're having too much sugar, or bacterial overgrowth, these junctions can loosen up, which we see on the right here. And then we get opportunistic infection because the bacteria, virus, whatever, can get into the bloodstream where it's not supposed to be. And then we get infection to wherever it sets up. So mechanisms of leaky gut. can be anything from alcohol, gluten, casein, processed foods, excess sugars, fast foods, right? They can all weaken those gap junctions. Medications can do it, like corticosteroids, antibiotics, antacids, and xenobiotics. Okay. Furthermore, infections, right? We talked about H. pylori, bacterial overgrowth, yeast, viruses, parasites. Okay. And then stress can also do it, right? Increased cortisol, right? Cortisol is a stress hormone. Increased CRH and increased catecholamines, right? Your epinephrine, norepinephrine. Hormones can cause it, right? Decreased thyroid hormone, progesterone, estradiol, testosterone, and then things like traumas to your brain trauma, strokes, and neurodegeneration can all cause a leaky gut. And then finally, we have some metabolic problems that can cause it as well. Okay, so glycosylated end products, which come from cooking, right? Intestinal inflammation, okay, autoimmune conditions, and then surgery, scar tissues, and fascial adhesions. So what we want to do is we want to try and clean up the diet for at least 10 days, right? While we try and give the intestines a chance to heal. And we're going to cut out things like gluten, right? Gluten is a protein in wheat, right? Problem is that our wheat products have way too much gluten in it, far more than our ancestors had. So it's a little difficult to deal with. So we cut out all grains as much as possible, right? Pastas, bread, cereals, things like that, right? And we're going to switch to more of a paleo diet, right? All dairy products, we shouldn't be eating dairy anyway, unless you can get raw dairy, which I'm not sure if we can get in this country. But dairy products are really bad. I wrote an article on why dairy is so bad for you. So if you haven't read that and you're still eating dairy, I suggest you read it to just at least educate yourself. It's on my blog, drscottjahn.com. It's very informative, and hopefully it'll convince you to stay away from dairy, especially now. There's so many options as far as things like almond milk or rice milk or hemp milk or whatever. You don't need to have cow's milk right now. That's been treated with so many different problems, pus and fecal matter. Just read the article, you'll see. All right, and then you're going to cut out beans, okay, as well right now, and all alcohol. And then sugar, right? Sugar in all forms, which would include things like sucrose, okay? Which other things like fructose, which comes from high fructose corn syrup. That's probably the worst offender of them all. Okay, we're also going to cut out things like brown sugar, right? And go from there, all right? Okay, now list of things that you should just eliminate from your diet forever, right? Even after you repair your gut. And that's number one, highly processed foods, right? The more food can sit on a shelf and not break down, the more it's damaging to your body. It's the basic rule, right? If it can't digest or can't break down on a shelf, it won't break down in your body. So anything highly processed, because usually they're going to use trans fats, which are known cancer causers and things like that. Right? Foods with additives and chemicals and hormones, genetically modified foods, which there's two types of genetically modified foods. There's genetically modified food that's resistant to being sprayed with some kind of pesticide, and then there's a genetically modified food which makes its own pesticide called BT. All right. So either one of those have been shown to increase things like allergies, a leaky gut, and whatnot. So try and figure out what is genetically modified and what's not. Some countries make you list GMO or not. If you can't find that, some products will list that they're non-GMO, and if you still can't find that, you can go on the Environmental Working Group's website. It's www.ewg. EWG.org. And they have a list of the most highly genetically modified foods, as well as the dirtiest foods that you should stay away from. And if you still want more information on that, a guy by the name of Jeffrey Smith, he's one of the GMO experts in the world. His website is, if you just Google it, but I believe it's responsibletechnology.org or something like that. Just Google Jeffrey Smith and GMO. He'll pop up, guaranteed. All right. His website is super informative as far as educating yourself on GMOs and how to avoid them. Okay, then highly refined cooking oils, such as corn, soy, and most vegetable oils you want to stay away from. Fried foods. Fried foods in and of themselves are not terribly bad. The problem is, number one, they use cheap, inferior oil like a vegetable oil, right? Because you have to use a lot of it, and more higher quality oil is expensive. And number two, especially doing it in a restaurant, they're not going to throw the oil out. So they're reheating it, and oil gets rancid. Right, so now your food is getting fried in this rancid oil of an inferior quality, and that's what the problem comes. But if you really like fried foods, like a fried chicken or something, if you cook it in coconut oil and yourself, and you don't keep reheating the oil, it's not the word. I wouldn't eat it every day, but it's not the boogeyman like fried foods that at some restaurants that we know would be much worse. And then things like margarines and shortenings, right? Hydrogenated or trans fats, right? Trans fats are not natural fats, right? There's something called a cis and a trans, which are just the way the molecule is conformed. So trans fats is not natural, right? And the reason why companies make trans fats is because they don't break down, so they can sit on the shelf longer, so they don't have as much spoilage. But if it does, again, if it doesn't break down on the shelf, it's not going to break down in your body, and it's going to start to form the cell membranes of the body. Right now, these trans fats are very rigid, so now you can't get a transfer of nutrients in the cell, and you can't get waste products out of the cell, and then the cell will start to mutate the DNA, and boom, there you get cancer. Right, and then it'll replicate. So stay away from trans fats. Now, I know what people think, right? Well, I have a cheat day. I got my cheat day. Once a week is a cheat day. Here's the problem with trans fats. As we said, they don't break down. It takes, I think, 38 days for a trans fat to break down. So if you're going to have a cheat day, once every 38 days, right? Which is, you could say once a month, right? I'll give you that. But, you can see how long this stuff stays in your body and is causing problems. So a cheat day once a week, those trans fats are going to build up. So just try and stay away from them. And then all artificial sweeteners, like we mentioned earlier, right? High fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is probably the number one reason why people get non-alcoholic fatty liver, because your body treats it almost the same as it does alcohol, and it will cause a fatty liver, right? Which we're going to show you in a minute how to clean out your liver. So food sensitivities. How do we know if we're irritating our gut lining, right? Well, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can go get a blood test, right? It's called the IgG antibody test. It's not 100% because there are different kinds of reactions. There's a cell-mediated reaction. There's an IgA-mediated reaction. So you might have either not a full-blown reaction, but more of a low-grade reaction to it. There's another way to do it, and it's called elimination provocation. And basically, what you would do is you would try and eat super clean, only a couple of foods that you know are safe and you know you don't have reaction to, maybe like organic chicken breast and some steamed broccoli or something like that. And then after about 5 days of doing that, you introduce one food every 3 days, because you can get a reaction a good 3 days after you've eaten a food if you're have a food sensitivity to it. So you just introduce food once every 3 days and keep a diary down and see if any of your symptoms come back. And if they do, it's a good idea that stay away from that food, at least for the time being, until you can fully repair your gut. Another way you can check, not foolproof again, but is to check your pulse. You check your pulse before you eat the food, check it immediately after, and then check it again about 15 minutes after, and see if you get a more than like a 10% rise in your pulse. If you do, right, your body's having a reaction to that food. It's something you might want to stay away from. Okay, so actually this slide should have been somewhere else, but we'll just, I'm going to skip over it because this should have been earlier as far as what foods we should eat. We'll just talk about it real quick, right? So as we're trying to heal the gut, right, non-starchy vegetables should make up the majority of your diet, right? Low glycemic fruits such as berries, kiwis, right? We don't want to spike our insulin levels. So I go back and forth with nuts. Some nuts can be a little abrasive on the intestines, but they have a lot of benefits with good oils and whatnot. Seeds like chia, hemp, pumpkin, sesame, flax, and sunflower. Actually, we're going to see in a little bit how pumpkin seeds are actually one of the things we're going to use to help kill parasites. Okay. Then grass-fed, hormone-free organic beef, lamb, and bison, right? Organic, antibiotic-free, boneless, skinless chicken, and then same thing on turkey breast or ground turkey. And then organic grass range, antibiotic and hormone-free beef. Okay, again, another one. I missed them both, sorry. So this is more on the diet of what, clean things to eat while we're trying to repair our gut. Okay, so we have low mercury seafood such as clams, crab, flounder, herrings, oyster. You can read it. Salmon, sardines. Organic omega-3 enriched free-range eggs. Okay. When we have eggs, it's noteworthy that you want to make sure that you do not cook the yolk, right? The yolk should be runny. Okay, as it breaks down, denatures, and we make like a scrambled egg or something like that. That's when the cholesterol becomes a problem. But the cholesterol is not a problem as long as the yolk is running. There's a compound in there that's going to help make sure the cholesterol doesn't build up in your bloodstream. Okay, okay. So non-GMO soy, other than soybeans. All right. And we talk about extra virgin olive oil. It's just a good oil. I wouldn't cook in extra virgin olive oil because it's got a slow smoke point, which means it breaks down with high heat. Coconut oil or avocado oil are much better for cooking. Okay. Then other healthy organic oils for salads is walnut, sesame seed, flaxseed, and avocado. Organic grapeseed oil for high temperature cooking is another good one. And then flours, you want to use things like coconut flour or almond flour, which is much healthier for you and not leaching like a white flour. And then we mentioned this earlier, but almond milk, coconut milk, hemp milk are all much better options than a cow's milk. So we touched on this again earlier too. We're talking about genetically modified foods. Genetically modified, or otherwise known as GMO, two types, right? One was the Bt toxin we talked about, which is the genetically modified organism that produces its own toxin, right? That one tends to be a little bit more abrasive on the body because as you ingest it, it's still going to produce its toxin inside the body and can destabilize your gut, can create that leaky gut syndrome and cause bacterial problems. Then the other one is makes it resistant to pesticide, most notably something called Roundup. The problem with that one is when a crop is resistant to to being sprayed with these pesticides, they use more pesticides, right? So now all of a sudden you get a heavy dose of pesticides and you're going to ingest that and you're going to have problems with that as well. So not going to read this list. You can see it here, and I'm recording this, so I'm going to put it on a replay. So if you want, or you can just take a screenshot. These are the most common crops that are genetically modified, right? Just name a couple of them: corn, soybean, papaya, zucchini, right? It's a good list. Like I said, Jeffrey Smith does a much better job than I do of educating people on the dangers of genetically modified foods, okay? So bone broth is one of the best ways to help heal your gut, right? While we're trying to, so we're going to put our diet of a super clean diet, try and help relax it a little bit. And we're going to use things like aloe vera and a bone broth. Now, you can make a bone broth from actually bones, right? If you're going to do that, the problem is you have to find bones from an organic source if possible, because bones tend to have a lot of heavy metals in them. So if you're going to make your own bone broth, it's possible that you're going to be getting a heavy dose of heavy metals, which are not good because they're endocrine disruptors and cause nervous system problems. You can buy like healthy options. You can buy bone broth, and I know in New York, where I'm from, you can actually buy bone broth just like you buy coffee. All right, super good for you and super healing for the intestines. Okay, here is this is not my own recipe. I got it somewhere off the internet. I can't remember the exact site, but you can make a vegan bone broth as well if we're concerned about not getting any excess of heavy metals in your system, right? And the recipe that I'm going to share with you has all these ingredients in it. Right, spinach or kale, coconut aminos, turmeric, coconut oil, shiitake mushrooms, wakame seaweed. Okay, hopefully you can read that. It's a little tight, but there's the ingredients, right? Just again, just take a screenshot if you can, or again, when I post it on YouTube, you can just replay it back there at your leisure. So you're basically just going to add everything together in a large pot, bring it to a boil for about an hour. Okay, once everything's been cooked, you're going to strain it, and then you're going to drink it. Now, if you do decide to make your own bone broth, right, you're going to want to use bones, thick bones that have marrow in them. Beef bones, you tend to work better when you put them in a large pot with water. Okay, you're going to boil them for 2 days, so 48 hours you're supposed to boil them. If you use tiny bones like chicken bones, they're not as effective, but you don't have to boil them for 24 hours. But a beef bone, about 48 hours. So you're going to have to keep adding water to it. You're also going to add a little vinegar, because the vinegar helps release all the minerals in the bones. Okay. So contrary to common belief, the body doesn't directly absorb the collagen that's in the bone broth. The collagen is produced by the body by using the amino acids and a vitamin C through the diet. And it so happens that those things are present in both seaweed and also in many plant proteins, such as sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, whole hemp, pine pollen, and fermented soy products like miso and spirulina. All right, so that's what we're doing. We're trying to increase the collagen and repair our gut. So a quick word on functioning, needing proper function of liver, gallbladder, pancreas in order to get proper digestion. Okay, and make sure that we're not insulting our intestine. We talked a little bit about pancreas earlier, as far as making sure that our bolus is acidic, so that we can stimulate our amylases and our pancreatic juices. Okay. Other things, if you didn't sit in on my diabetes lecture, it's on YouTube available. We go into depth on what's needed for pancreas health. So liver, gallbladder. Now your liver is responsible for so many different functions, right? So primarily, it's responsible for helping filter out any kind of waste products, right? It's kind of your oil filter, if you will. But it also does things like store glucose, right, for energy. It also makes cholesterol, right? So it has a lot of different functions. Also, it's hormones. And your gallbladder is basically a storage center for bile, or what's going to use to emulsify fats. Okay, so if you're if you're a little sensitive to digestion of proper fats, right, you get either bloating or something like that, what you can do is you can get a glass of warm water in the morning, a little bit of cayenne pepper, some salt, and some lemon, and it'll help stimulate the bile production and eliminate toxins, right? Because a lot of toxins get eliminated. Not only toxins, but also cholesterol gets eliminated through the bile. Right, so it's pretty important to make sure it's functioning properly, right? Because we can get gallstones and things like that that can help that can clog up that area. So, function of gallbladder, as we mentioned, is to store bile. It has a sphincter that relaxes, that helps push that bile into the intestines, which is going to digest our fats. Okay, so it's a good idea to detoxify the liver once, twice a year. I do it once a year, and the way you're going to do it, I mentioned this before. So if anybody has been to one of my lectures, I apologize if this is redundant, but you're going to spend a week in preparation, and you're going to avoid any kind of foods that are very irritating. Now, if we're going through this program, you should be avoiding these foods anyway. But any kind of foods, high spice foods, processed foods, any kind of beverages like colas and things like that. Also, chilled things and cold things are going to be a little bit insulting on the liver, gallbladder. All right, so it's going to reduce the effectiveness of the cleanse. Okay, try to avoid animal sources, right? Avoid dairy products, fried foods. So we want to keep stress off the liver while we're doing this. So it's only a week, so you should be able to do it. Okay, limit consumption of juices and things like that. Okay, what you're going to do for the 5 days is you're going to drink about 32 ounces of apple juice a day for 5 or 6 days. Now, apple juice has something called malic acid in it. That malic acid tends to soften gallstones, right? Because as these gallstones come out, right, we don't want to get them stuck in our pathways, right? So we want to make them soft, and that's what the apple juice will do. But I warn you, you should keep a toothbrush with you, because it's going to build up on your teeth, and you'll feel a little yucky. So you want to brush your teeth repeatedly. And then after, what you can do is drink the apple juice slowly throughout the day or between meals. Right? Avoid drinking the juice during or just before the first 2 hours or after a meal in the evening. In addition, you want to drink 6 to 8 ounces of glass of water a day. Then on the 6th day, you're going to drink the 32 ounces of apple juice in the morning. And if you're feeling hungry in the morning, you can eat a light breakfast and avoid sugars and sweeteners and milks and butters and oils and things like that, which you should be avoiding throughout the whole week anyway. For lunch, eat plain or cooked steamed vegetables with some white rice. And then 12 o'clock, that's it. You cut off on eating anything for the rest of the day. You can drink water or a little bit of fresh juice. Okay, and at 6:30 p.m., that's where you don't have any more fluids at all. You want to empty your stomach, because what's going to happen is if there's some fluids in your stomach, the oils that you're going to be ingesting will sit on top of it, and you'll get a little sick. So you want to make sure you don't do that. So make sure you're not drinking any fluids. Okay. At 7 p.m., you're going to drink a 1/4 cup of extra virgin olive oil and then 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. And you're going to repeat this every 15 minutes until you drink an entire pint of extra virgin olive oil. It sounds disgusting, but it's really not that bad. Okay. Towards the end of the pint, it starts to get a little tedious, but it's really not as bad as it sounds. Okay, as you begin to have bowel movements, you're going to check for gallstones. And that's kind of important that you check for gallstones. I know most people get kind of grossed out by this fact, but you really need to know exactly what's kind of coming in and going out. Because if a lot of gallstones are coming out, then you're going to need to repeat this process about a month later, right? Until your gallstones are not coming out anymore. So if you're going to collect your stool sample, you need some kind of like a filter or some kind of colander to catch them, so you can look at them. And they'll be green, little green balls, which you'll see in there. Okay, so 10:30 next morning, you can drink some fresh squeezed fruit juice, and a half hour later, you can eat a little bit of fresh fruit. And an hour after that, you can eat some light food. All right. You should be back to normal, or probably within the rest of the day. Right after probably midday, you're probably going to feel back to normal. Right, but just take it easy as far as your eating goes. Right, because you kind of just put your body through a lot of stress. And then after doing a cleanse of any kind, it's a good idea to reestablish proper gut flora by taking a good probiotic. Now, I'm always in favor of making your own probiotic, because when you buy something off the shelf, number one, it's expensive. Number two, probiotics are live, so you don't know what you're getting with something off the shelf, because heat will kill it. So something could have been in a warehouse that's very hot or something like that, and you just kind of don't know what you're getting. If you're interested in learning how to make your own probiotic, go to my YouTube page. I have a whole video on how to make sauerkraut, and it's super easy and super cheap. It costs you probably less than 100 pesos to make it for a month, versus going to supplement store and buying it, which is going to be probably a couple thousand pesos. And it's much better for you. Studies show that soil-based probiotics are much better for the intestines. All right. So some liver herbs after we do the cleanse, right, to help repair our liver would be N-acetylcysteine, milk thistle, right, alpha lipoic acid, curcumin, which is found in turmeric, omega-3, selenium, folate, B6, B12, and foods that are high in sulfur content, like eggs, right? No, there we go, I put it in there. Garlic, onion, broccoli, kale, cabbage have all shown to increase the levels of glutathione, which is a liver detoxifying molecule. Okay, then rebuilding herbs, green tea, avocados, walnut, turmeric again, dandelion root, and then artichoke leaf, ginger, clove, cinnamon, burdock root, and horsetail, parsley root, and juniper berries. All are going to help cleanse the liver and help repair it. Now, glutathione is a very simple molecule that's comprised of 3 protein building blocks, or 3 amino acids: cysteine, glycine, and glutamine. Okay, and glutamine is a very powerful detoxifier because it contains sulfur, which is a very sticky adhesive molecule. All right, so. Next, let's just talk quick about parasites, right? So parasites can get into our body from the foods we eat. It's, anything that we put in our mouth most likely has parasites on it, right? People often have parasites and don't even realize it. And by far the best way to get rid of them is by a combination of 3 things: clove, wormwood, and black walnut. Right? You have to take them in combination, all 3 of them. But when you take them together, they'll kill the parasites. Now, the problem with it is, if you want to be thorough, is to make sure that you take it for about a month, I believe, because it's not just the parasites you're trying to kill, but the eggs, right? Because you can kill the parasites, but then if the eggs aren't killed, they're just going to come back. Right. Another thing that's been shown to be effective is pumpkin seed, about a cup twice a day, and also mimosa pudica, I believe it's pronounced, 2 capsules at bedtime. Those will both paralyze the parasites. And then finally, you can also take a believe it's cod liver oil, right? But you have to freeze it, right? And it's kind of it's difficult to freeze. It takes probably like a week to freeze, from what I understand, because it's very viscous. But when you freeze it, it gets lower in the intestines. And if you take the pumpkin seed, the mimosa, purica, and the frozen cod liver oil, you're supposed to be very effective at killing parasites as well. Now, when you kill parasites, oftentimes you have what's called die-off reaction, which causes you to kind of get a little brain fog, tired, irritable. Sometimes you get headaches, right? Just expect it. You can do some light exercise that can help kind of sweat that out, or you can get in a bathtub with some what you call Epsom salt, which will help kind of pull stuff out of your pores, or do an enema or something like that can help as well. Other things I use are things like charcoal as a supplement. It'll help bind things and pull it out of your system. Or I don't want to mess up the pronunciation. Diatomaceous earth, something like that. It'll also help kind of bind up what's in the intestines and help pull it out. Okay, and I think it's our getting to the end, right? We have something called GI microbiome, right? We mentioned it earlier. It's our gut flora, our intestinal health, right? Our probiotics. You always have to re-inoculate, because they are responsible for helping make things like vitamin K in the intestines. They help prevent the overgrowth of the bad bacteria. So your body has over 500 different species of microorganisms, and there's more actual probiotic in your body than there are cells. So it's extremely important to put that back in the intestines. All right. And again, soil-based products are better. I prefer making my own kimchi, sauerkraut, things like that. Fermented vegetables of any kind, as opposed to buying it. Kefir, or kefir, I think is how it's pronounced, is another good option. Could also make something called kombucha, which is another option. Just Google it; it's very easy to make. And then I would stay away from things like yogurt, because it's a dairy base, and dairy is not very good for the intestines. All right. So our dysbiosis symptoms that we get when we have problems with our microbiome, things like diarrhea, gas, bloating, constipation, irritable bowel, inflammatory bowel disease, reflux, gastritis, abdominal pain, and we get that leaky gut, autoimmune diseases, infectious arthritis, recurring vaginitis, and metabolic syndromes and obesity, all because of lack of proper gut flora. All right. Now, we're going to talk real quick about the vagus nerve, right? So the vagus nerve is probably the most important nerve in the body, right? Vagus nerve is responsible for many, many things, including gut motility and whatnot, right? So it initiates salivation. It also initiates acid production, stimulates pancreatic enzyme secretion. It causes receptive relaxation of stomach and duodenum to accommodate entry of the bolus, right, of the food. Stimulates buffer secretions, and stimulates primary and secondary esophageal peristalsis. Okay. Initiates relaxation of the sphincter of Oddi, which is where the gallbladder is going to be sending its digestive juices. Stimulates the synthesis of bile by the liver, and stimulates intestinal motility. So it has a lot of functions when it comes to gut health. Right? It's responsible for vagal response reduces stress. It reduces our heart rate and blood pressure. Right? It's a parasympathetic nerve, right? We heard of sympathetic or fight or flight, which is the sympathetic, and parasympathetic is what we call feed or breed. So we are going to stimulate it by a number of different things, right? You can get a chiropractic adjustment, will help stimulate the vagus nerve. Okay, taking a cold shower will stimulate it. Deep, slow breathing will also stimulate it, like meditation. Singing, humming, chanting, and gargling, right? Because part of that vagus nerve is in the back of the throat. Probiotics will help. Again, meditation, omega-3 fatty acids, exercise, massage, and socializing and laughter will all been shown to stimulate the vagus nerve. Right? So vagus nerve needs to be stimulated repeatedly throughout the day. So not just one of these things. You should try and do as many of them as possible, as often as possible, right? Which will help stimulate that nerve and help get your intestines flowing again. All right, we're going to skip over this one. All right, so that concludes. I know we ran way over by half an hour, and I didn't even cover all of what I wanted to. But you know, it's just such a huge topic that tried to get to as much as possible. Hope you guys are still with me. And I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, you can just drop me a note. Just go to, you can see my website is drscottjahn.com, and there's a contact me page. My email address is just doc@drscottjahn.com. You can drop me an email. I'm happy to help you if you have any questions or concerns. All right. Also, you know, if you guys want to follow me, I would love it. This way, I'd like to get feedback from you guys. If you guys want to know anything in the future, right? Our next lecture is going to be on thyroid health, which was suggested to me by one of my patients. So that's going to be next month. And if you have any suggestions, I'm open to it. And I also produce stuff on my YouTube channel, usually that I haven't gotten to because of time constraints on our lecture. So I follow my YouTube channel, and you probably get some bonus material there as well. All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed this and found it useful. And hopefully I'll see you next month when we're going to do thyroid. Okay. Have a good night and take care.